Welcome to the Liberty Myself Emancipation Media Club. Today's reading is
The Human Machine by Arnold Bennett.
This is part of our twice-daily content heartbeat designed to help build information autonomy in our algorithm-dominated world. Listen, reflect, and engage however works for you. Without further ado, let's jump in. Stay free.
The Human Machine by Arnold Bennett, Chapter 1, Taking Oneself for Granted. There are men who are capable of loving a machine more deeply than they can love a woman. They are among the happiest men on earth. This is not a sneer meanly shot from cover at women. It is simply a statement of notorious fact. Men who worry themselves to distraction over the perfecting of a machine are indubitably blessed beyond their kind. Most of us have known such men. Yesterday they were constructing motor cars. But today aeroplanes are in the air, or, at any rate, they ought to be, according to the inventors. Watch the inventors. Invention is not usually their principal business. They must invent in their spare time. They must invent before breakfast, invent in the Strand between Lyons's and the office, invent after dinner, invent on Sundays. See with what ardor they rush home of a night. See how they seize a half-holiday, like hungry dogs a bone. They don't want golf, bridge, limericks, novels, illustrated magazines, clubs, whiskey, starting prices, hints about neckties, political meetings, yarns, comic songs, and Turek salts, nor the smiles that are situate between a gay corsage and a picture hat. They never wonder, at a loss, what they will do next. Their evenings never drag, are always too short. You may, indeed, catch them at 12 o'clock at night on the flat of their backs, but not in bed. No. In a shed, under a machine, holding a candle, whose paths drop fatness, up to the connecting rod that is strained, or the wheel that is out of center. They are continually interested, nay, enthralled. They have a machine, and they are perfecting it. They get one part right, and then another goes wrong, and they get that right, and then another goes wrong, and so on. When they are quite sure they have reached perfection, forth issues the machine out of the shed, and in 5 minutes is smashed up, together with a limb or so of the inventors, just because they had been quite sure too soon. Then the whole business starts again. They do not give up. That particular wreck was, of course, due to a mere oversight. The whole business starts again. For they have glimpsed perfection, they have the gleam of perfection in their souls. Thus their lives run away. They will never fly, you remark, cynically. Well, if they don't? Besides, what about right? With all your cynicism, have you never envied them their machine and their passionate interest in it, you know, perhaps, the moment when, brushing in front of the glass, you detected your first gray hair? You stopped brushing, then you resumed brushing, hastily, you pretended not to be shocked, but you were. Perhaps you know a more disturbing moment than that, the moment when it suddenly occurred to you that you had arrived, as far as you ever will arrive. And you had realized as much of your early dream as you ever will realize, and the realization was utterly unlike the dream. The marriage was excessively prosaic and eternal, not at all what you expected it to be, and your illusions were dissipated, and games and hobbies had an unpleasant core of tedium and futility, and the ideal tobacco mixture did not exist, and one literary masterpiece resembled another, and all the days that are to come will more or less resemble the present day. Until you die, and in an illuminating flash you understood what all those people were driving at when they wrote such unconscionably long letters to the telegraph as to life being worth living or not worth living. And there was naught to be done but face the gray, monotonous future, and pretend to be cheerful with the worm of ennui gnawing at your heart. In a word, the moment when it occurred to you that yours is the common lot. In that moment have you not wished, do you not continually wish, for an exhaustless machine, a machine that you could never get to the end of? Would you not give your head to be lying on the flat of your back, peering with a candle, dirty, foiled, catching cold, but absorbed in the pursuit of an object? Have you not gloomily regretted that you were born without a mechanical turn, because there is really something about a machine? It has never struck you that you do possess a machine. Oh, blind. Oh, dull. It has never struck you that you have at hand a machine wonderful beyond all mechanisms in sheds, intricate, delicately adjustable, of astounding and miraculous possibilities, interminably interesting. That machine is yourself. This fellow is preaching. I won't have it, you exclaim resentfully. Dear sir, I am not preaching, and, even if I were, I think you would have it. I think I can anyhow keep hold of your button for a while, though you pull hard. I am not preaching. I am simply bent on calling your attention to a fact which has perhaps wholly or partially escaped you, namely, that you are the most fascinating bit of machinery that ever was. You do yourself less than justice. It is said that men are only interested in themselves. The truth is that, as a rule, men are interested in every mortal thing except themselves. They have a habit of taking themselves for granted, and that habit is responsible for 9/10 of the boredom and despair on the face of the planet. A man will wake up in the middle of the night, usually owing to some form of delightful excess, and his brain will be very active indeed for a space ere he can go to sleep again. In that candid hour, after the exaltation of the evening and before the hope of the dawn, he will see everything in its true colors, except himself. There is nothing like a sleepless couch for a clear vision of one's environment. He will see all his wife's faults and the hopelessness of trying to cure them. He will momentarily see, though with less sharpness of outline, his own faults. He will probably decide that the anxieties of children outweigh the joys connected with children. He will admit all the shortcomings of existence, will face them like a man, grimly, sourly, in a sturdy despair. He will mutter, "Of course I'm angry. Who wouldn't be? Of course I'm disappointed. Did I expect this 20 years ago? Yes, we ought to save more. But we don't, so there you are. I'm bound to worry. I know I should be better if I didn't smoke so much. I know there's absolutely no sense at all in taking liqueurs. Absurd to be ruffled with her when she's in one of her moods. I don't have enough exercise. Can't be regular, somehow. Not the slightest use hoping that things will be different, because I know they won't. Queer world. Never really what you may call happy, you know. Now, if things were different. He loses consciousness. Observe, he has taken himself for granted, just glancing at his faults and looking away again. It is his environment that has occupied his attention, and his environment, things that he would wish to have different, did he not know, out of the fullness of experience, that it is futile to desire such a change. What he wants is a pipe that won't put itself into his mouth, a glass that won't leap of its own accord to his lips. Money that won't slip untouched out of his pocket, legs that without asking will carry him certain miles every day in the open air, habits that practice themselves, a wife that will expand and contract according to his humors, like a Wernicke bookcase, always complete but never finished. Wise man, he perceives at once that he can't have these things. And so he resigns himself to the universe, and settles down to a permanent, restrained discontent. No one shall say he is unreasonable. You see, he has given no attention to the machine. Let us not call it a flying machine. Let us call it simply an automobile. There it is on the road, jolting, screeching, rattling, perfuming. And there he is, saying, "This road ought to be as smooth as velvet. That hill in front is ridiculous, and the descent on the other side positively dangerous. And it's all turns, I can't see 100 yards in front." He has a wild idea of trying to force the county council to sandpaper the road, or of employing the new territorial army to remove the hill. But he dismisses that idea, he is so reasonable. He accepts all. He sits clothed in reasonableness on the machine, and accepts all. Ass, you exclaim. Why doesn't he get down and inflate that tire, for one thing? Anyone can see the sparking apparatus is wrong, and it's perfectly certain the gearbox wants oil. Why doesn't he? I will tell you why he doesn't. Just because he isn't aware that he is on a machine at all. He has never examined what he is on. And at the back of his consciousness is a dim idea that he is perched on a piece of solid, immutable rock that runs on casters. Chapter 2, Amateurs in the Art of Living. Considering that we have to spend the whole of our lives in this human machine, considering that it is our sole means of contact and compromise with the rest of the world, we really do devote to it very little attention. When I say we, I mean our inmost spirits, the instinctive part, the mystery within that exists. And when I say the human machine, I mean the brain and the body, and chiefly the brain. The expression of the soul by means of the brain and body is what we call the art of living. We certainly do not learn this art at school to any appreciable extent. At school we are taught that it is necessary to fling our arms and legs to and fro for so many hours per diem. We are also shown, practically, that our brains are capable of performing certain useful tricks, and that if we do not compel our brains to perform those tricks we shall suffer. Thus one day we run home and proclaim to our delighted parents that 11/12 are 132. A feat of the brain. So it goes on until our parents begin to look up to us because we can chatter of cosines or sketch the foreign policy of Louis XIV. Good. But not a word about the principles of the art of living yet. Only a few detached rules from our parents, to be blindly followed when particular crises supervene. And, indeed, it would be absurd to talk to a schoolboy about the expression of his soul. He would probably mutter a monosyllable which is not mice. Of course, school is merely a preparation for living, unless one goes to a university, in which case it is a preparation for university. One is supposed to turn one's attention to living when these preliminaries are over, say at the age of about 20. Assuredly one lives then. There is, however, nothing new in that, for one has been living all the time, in a fashion, all the time one has been using the machine without understanding it. But does one, school and college being over, enter upon a study of the machine? Not a bit. The question then becomes, not how to live, but how to obtain and retain a position in which one will be able to live, how to get minute portions of dead animals and plants which one can swallow. In order not to die of hunger, how to acquire and constantly renew a stock of other portions of dead animals and plants in which one can envelop oneself in order not to die of cold, how to procure the exclusive right of entry into certain huts where one may sleep and eat without being rained upon by the clouds of heaven. And so forth. And when one has realized this ambition, there comes the desire to be able to double the operation and do it, not for oneself alone, but for oneself and another. Marriage. But no scientific sustained attention is yet given to the real business of living, of smooth intercourse, of self-expression, of conscious adaptation to environment, in brief, to the study of the machine. At 30 the chances are that a man will understand better the draft of a chimney than his own respiratory apparatus, to name one of the simple, obvious things, and as for understanding the working of his own brain, what an idea! As for the skill to avoid the waste of power involved by friction in the business of living, do we give an hour to it in a month? Do we ever at all examine it save in an amateurish and clumsy fashion? A young lady produces a watercolor drawing. Very nice, we say, and add, to ourselves, for an amateur. But our living is more amateurish than that young lady's drawing, though surely we ought every one of us to be professionals at living, when we have been engaged in the preliminaries to living for about 55 years. We begin to think about slacking off. Up till this period our reason for not having scientifically studied the art of living, the perfecting and use of the finer parts of the machine, is not that we have lacked leisure, most of us have enormous heaps of leisure, but that we have simply been too absorbed in the preliminaries, have, in fact, treated the preliminaries to the business as the business itself. Then at 55 we ought at last to begin to live our lives with professional skill, as a professional painter paints pictures. Yes, but we can't. It is too late then. Neither painters, nor acrobats, nor any professionals can be formed at the age of 55. Thus we finish our lives amateurishly. As we have begun them. And when the machine creaks and sets our teeth on edge, or refuses to obey the steering wheel and deposits us in the ditch, we say, "Can't be helped," or "Doesn't matter. It will be all the same 100 years hence," or "I must make the best of things." And we try to believe that in accepting the status quo we have justified the status quo, and all the time we feel our insincerity. You exclaim that I exaggerate. I do. To force into prominence an aspect of affairs usually overlooked, it is absolutely necessary to exaggerate. Poetic license is one name for this kind of exaggeration. But I exaggerate very little indeed, much less than perhaps you think. I know that you are going to point out to me that vast numbers of people regularly spend a considerable portion of their leisure in striving after self-improvement. Granted. And I am glad of it. But I should be gladder if their strivings bore more closely upon the daily business of living, of self-expression without friction and without futile desires. See this man who regularly studies every evening of his life. He has genuinely understood the nature of poetry, and his taste is admirable. He recites verse with true feeling, and may be said to be highly cultivated. Poetry is a continual source of pleasure to him. True. But why is he always complaining about not receiving his deserts in the office? Why is he worried about finance? Why does he so often sulk with his wife? Why does he persist in eating more than his digestion will tolerate? It was not written in the book of fate that he should complain and worry and sulk and suffer. And if he was a professional at living he would not do these things. There is no reason why he should do them, except the reason that he has never learned his business, never studied the human machine as a whole, never really thought rationally about living. Supposing you encountered an automobilist who was swerving and grinding all over the road, and you stopped to ask what was the matter, and he replied, "Never mind what's the matter. Just look at my lovely acetylene lamps, how they shine, and how I've polished them." You would not regard him as a Clifforderp, or even as an entirely sane man. So with our student of poetry. It is indubitable that a large amount of what is known as self-improvement is simply self-indulgence, a form of pleasure which only incidentally improves a particular part of the machine. And even that to the neglect of far more important parts. My aim is to direct a man's attention to himself as a whole, considered as a machine, complex and capable of quite extraordinary efficiency, for traveling through this world smoothly, in any desired manner, with satisfaction not only to himself but to the people he meets en route, and the people who are overtaking him and whom he is overtaking. My aim is to show that only an inappreciable fraction of our ordered and sustained efforts is given to the business of actual living, as distinguished from the preliminaries to living. Have you ever spent more time trying to fix things around you than understanding yourself? What might change if you focused more on improving how you live and think every day?
This has been an EMC reading from Liberty Myself. To learn more about our project to create decentralized media alternatives, visit libertymyself.com. By creating Liberty Myself, we create liberty for all.